Hi, I'm Michael Kokenauer, President and CEO of itSynergy. I'm also a certified ethical hacker, which means I've agreed to use my powers for good and not evil. I'm just back from Las Vegas, where I attended DEF CON 26. For those who don't know, DEF CON is the single largest cybersecurity research, hacker, and breaching conference of the year. This year I had 3 key takeaways I wanted to share from the conference. Number one, I was very surprised to sit in a presentation by the NSA, the National Security Agency, where they said that they are now seeing Chinese state actors starting to attack managed services companies, companies like mine, as a way to get into other organizations. So what they're doing, what they've realized, is that rather than attacking their target directly, it's easier to attack the IT provider or the managed services company of that target, breach them, and through them get access to their ultimate target. So the takeaway from this, you need to be having the conversation with your IT provider, with your managed services company about what their security policies are and what they're doing to defend themselves from this type of attack. They ought to have a written policy and they ought to be able to provide it to you upon request. And you ought to read through that policy and make sure that it's sound. Takeaway number 2 is I was surprised at the level of sophistication of tools that utilize what they call OSINT. O-S-I-N-T. It stands for Open Source Intelligence. And what they're doing is they're building tools that aggregate data sources from multiple publicly available databases into a single tool in order to be able to do research and gather information on people that they're targeting. So for example, they could start out with your full name and plug it into this tool and get your date of birth, every phone number you've ever had, every address you've ever lived at, the names and ages of your kids, your driver's license number, your license plate number, what type of car you drive, and the list goes on and on and on. So the key takeaway from this is if you get a call or you get an email and somebody seems to have a lot of information about you and therefore you think it's legitimate, beware. Just because they have this information doesn't mean that the request or the email or the call is legitimate. You always need to have your guard up, and if something doesn't seem right, it's probably not. And my final takeaway from this year's event was that we have to switch our mentality when it comes to cybersecurity to a mentality of assume breach. What that means is we can no longer just dedicate our time and money and effort to constructing a perimeter and trying to keep the bad guys out. You have to operate under the mentality that the bad guys are going to get in, and rather than focusing your resources exclusively on keeping them out, now I'm not saying you can ignore that, we still need to have perimeter defenses to keep them out, but rather than focusing exclusively on that, we need to start putting our energy into how we're going to detect them once they're in, how we're going to keep them from moving laterally once they're in, and how we're going to respond to that. How are we going to deal with it once we're in? So we can no longer just assume that we're going to construct a shell to keep the bad guys out. We have to assume that the bad guys are going to get in, and we have to start planning for what we're going to do when they're in. So those were my 3 key takeaways from the DEF CON conference. It was a great conference. I got a lot of information, saw a lot of crazy stuff, and I'll be sharing that all with you over the next couple of weeks. Thanks very much for watching.